Good morning, everybody. How are you doing? Now, if I was facing you, you'd all tell me you're fine, okay? But when I look at the colour of your eyes, I know you're probably exhausted, absolutely stressed out with what you're managing, but doing a great job. So what I want to do today is to just not only look at how we get our children and young people to survive and then thrive, but you too have to thrive. So at the back of this, I want you to also remember you are the bedrock of the education system here. And that's really important, and it will sort of come to fruition a bit later on. So I've got a colleague on, Simon Roach, aka Professor Whitty, who is going to work my slides for me. So there may be a slight delay, but Simon, could you start with the next slide, please? So what Adam and Brianne have asked me to do are lots of little things, but hopefully what I want to do is put it in a context that you can use back in your working life. So you may or may not have seen that Ofsted has changed or made amendments to the inspection handbook because they're looking at a COVID context of schools. Now, we always say Ofsted's, shouldn't be the tail that wags the dog, but unfortunately that with the DFE logo are the two most important ones for schools. So we will look a little bit at the context of COVID, and then the difference that PESSPA has made and the lessons we've learned, the positive as well as the challenges, and then look at how we move forward so we don't get bogged down in a COVID curriculum, and then also then celebrate where we've come from. So what I'd like to do today with the next slide is to just put a baseline down, okay? So it's really important that we don't look back, only to see the journey that we've travelled. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? But what we have to do is celebrate. And we know that it's been a bit of a roller coaster ride. And, I have a son who works in education. My husband's in forensic hospital schools. And, to see them so demotivated with what some of the media said. And then you get fantastic messages back from children, young people and parents to teachers saying what a brilliant job. But it's never easy. So what I want you to do is believe in yourself, and more importantly, give hope to those young people, because the more pressure we're under, actually, the greater teachers and other workforce colleagues seem to perform. So it's really important that we maintain a positive culture going forward, because the words that have come out are the workforce is innovative, creative, resilient. And actually, they're adjectives I'd really be pleased to be associated with. We're not lazy, we're not dragging our feet, we're not wanting to stay working at home remotely because it's easier, because we know it wasn't, it was really difficult. So it's really important that we rise to the challenge, and as they say, cream rises to the top. Simon, can I have the next slide, please? So to put it into context for you, normally, that's the educational maze you negotiate, okay? You learn to navigate round the challenges, through them. Sometimes we just have to blast our way through. Other times we rely on colleagues, we get professional development, there are templates. But actually the maze we faced in the last 15 months is on the right. Absolute chaos. No one had a template. No one knew what to do or where to go. So it was an immense learning journey for us all, really. And if you think about how far we've travelled, what a journey. And one of the things, those of you who know me, I don't suffer fools gladly, and I'm a bit upset about this lost generation and catch up. I can think of another word for it all, beginning with a C, which is a load of rubbish, really, because our children and young people have learnt an awful lot. It may not be what was planned in the curriculum, but let's not forget the work the workforce has carried out. The teachers remotely recording, teaching live in front of those who were in school, plus all the support from parents and carers. To say there's been a massive gap in learning, I would actually challenge that. The learning has been different. So I think it's really important we put that in context. Now, what I'd like to show you is a little video, and you've probably seen it before, but it's just to remind ourselves how capable some young people are when they arrive at school. Now, this is a child, I think you would agree, is sort of school ready. They're only 18 months old, and potentially, I think they're still in nappies, but I'm not sure. But what I want you to do is afterwards, just call out or put it in the chat, whatever suits you best, the words that describe what you see about this young person. Simon, are you able to play? Right, here we go. Oh, he's stuck. Can he go? No? Oh yeah, he's off. Oh. That's great, Hannah. This is my favourite piece. Yeah. Yeah, problem solving. Thank you, Simon. Okay, well, absolutely spot on. Now, if a child can do that at 18 months, you know, that child demonstrated the ability to actually solve problems. They were confident, competent, really physically literate, you know, and the resilience, they were fearless, no rope. It wasn't that high, it wasn't as high as it looks, to be honest. It's one of those small climbing worlds, but no fear. Now, if they arrive like that, where can we take them? And my last video clip hopefully will show you that. But when they arrive to us, they're school ready, what journey can we take them on? So just bear that in mind. Now, we know every child doesn't arrive at that level, but it's really important if you're working in the early years that we baseline and see the capabilities of our young people. So we've been in a COVID world, we know that. What we don't want to do is literally throw the baby out with the bathwater, because there's been some phenomenal work going on. So we need to reflect, review, and if possible, refresh. Now, bearing in mind what Ofsted is saying, what we mustn't have is just a COVID curriculum, because if we do, it could become very narrow. Now, we know that health and well-being are now at the forefront. More than ever, head teachers and parents are saying it's the most important thing. However, I have this saying, which I get told off for, but I will say it: strategy without execution is hallucination. And now that's what happens. We all know it's important, but when we get back into school, is it straight into catch up for literacy and numeracy and other aspects of the curriculum? And what we have to look at here is, if children do not feel safe, they do not feel secure and are not confident, you can put them in any learning situation you like, but it will not develop, because we haven't put in the baseline physical, emotional, social in order to develop their cognitive aspects. So it's really important we place PE school, sport and physical activity at the heart of the school, but it's got to be a whole school buy-in. Now, looking at that video, we need children to take suitable challenges and acceptable risks. Now, they're going to be, in some cases, quite resistant to that because they have survived in a home bubble. So it's building up that confidence that they are prepared to take challenges, because we say, don't we, we learn from our mistakes, but often we're never allowed to make mistakes, and if we do, then we get hit over the head from them. Well, if we truly believe that, we have to learn by doing and make those mistakes in order to move on. And the way to do that is in that last bullet point. We need to engage and challenge children and young people, and then take this holistic approach for them to feel safe, secure and confident. Thank you, Simon. Could I have the next one, please? Now, For some time, there's been a massive debate, I'm sure you've seen it on social media, etc., about PE sport and physical activity. But many years ago, and I will come back to that slide in about 3 more slides on, everybody signed up to what that actually meant. Now, it doesn't mean we're all wrong or we disagree, but it's absolutely critical that all 3 of those areas are embedded. Whatever your interpretation is about them, PE is at the heart. That is the statutory entitlement. School sport is the enrichment, and physical activity is actually that all-embracing movement. So it's really important we have the debate. We get head teachers to understand that actually, I'm sure those head teachers and governors who don't put PE at the heart isn't because they don't like it or don't understand it. It's because they have different priorities. So what you've got to do out there is be those advocates to change their lens, because we have to move to the position on the next slide. We have to create a positive, Simon, could you move me on? Sorry. We have to create positive attitudes. We do not want children and young people even more demotivated. We do not want them having negative experiences. That said, they have to learn to lose with grace. They have to accept if something doesn't go well, to look at that little person there and how they readjusted and they knew they were not going to get up there. Now, at his age, he probably doesn't understand it's a physical thing about stretch and reach and so on. But we have to teach children to understand why they're not successful. Doesn't mean they're never going to be successful. It means it's a different challenge. But we have to rebuild confidence, which is absolutely key. Now, what we have got is quite a lot of insight and research now just over the last year. Simon, could I have the next slide, please? Now, a lot of this came from the Sheffield Hallam University, 65,000 pupils. That's a hell of a piece of research, and 5,000 teachers. It was initially secondary in Teaching Schools Alliances. There is also the research from Professor Chris Atkinson at MMU, who've worked with Yorkshire Sport, as well as the Sport England Active Life and a whole plethora of other agencies, all valid research. And what is clear is the same things are emerging, that there are key areas that children need to actually thrive in, and that is their well-being, their behaviour, happiness, impacts on the 2 above, and how they socially engage. All of those 4 have been a massive detriment through COVID, and we need to move that forward, because if we don't support our young people and those 4 areas are not happening for them, they are never going to thrive. It'll just be about survival, and we can't afford to do that. We need, through PE, school sport, physical activity, to actually improve their well-being physically and emotionally. That will improve their behaviour, which will help them be confident and learn all the aspects within the curriculum that they're supposed to learn. And they need to be happy, because if they're not going to learn. And then we need to get them to be able to re-socialise with their peers. Now, something Jason Robinson taught me was about well-being. And there's a lot of people pushing that we need a well-being assessment in school. But I'd like you to consider this really, and put in the chat what you feel about it. If that becomes a criteria for Ofsted, Jason said he'd go to school and he'd have a brilliant day and he'd be thriving. And if he was assessed on his well-being that day, he'd be 10 out of 10. He'd go home, witness horrendous scenes of abuse, anger, violence, and he'd come into school the next day broken. Now, if he was assessed that day, his well-being would be minus. Now, do we want teachers responsible for that? A teacher cannot, or the rest of the workforce, be responsible for what happens at home. They can be part of the solution. So is it about actually being more prescriptive about what it is we're assessing in physical education, sport and physical activity? The emotional well-being is a subjective value judgment, and if I was still inspecting, I certainly wouldn't want to make a call on that. It's not fair on our colleagues, but put in what you feel. Would you want to be responsible for actually Brianne, it relies upon strong relationships with pupils, teachers in regard to honesty and trust. Absolutely spot on. But do we want to be responsible for that? So let's just look at a couple of more pieces of research before we get to Ofsted. What's important on the next slide is the one we've circled in red. Their well-being is absolutely critical here. Sydney Hook said that young people remember teachers, not the methods or the techniques that they were taught. You know, you are the bedrock of the educational establishment. And if you're not emotionally well and physically well, that's going to have an impact. Now, look at the difference. It's still very positive about how it impacts on children and young people's moods, but actually that should be 100%. So we need to look at that. Do children, are we really teaching them about how important and why physical education, sport, physical activity is important? And then last but not least, this is a bit of an aid memoir that you might want to use back in school about engaging young people. And it is all about that pupil voice. We've also been working on something, it's not live yet, called Studio U for Sport England, and it's about changing the curriculum for young women in schools, because that was a big issue for them. They didn't like invasion games. They've had massive challenges in COVID because they're having to be taught in a mixed bubble, because it's if someone in the class tests positive, it's easier to send a class home than it is a whole year of group. So they've actually gone to just using PE in a class context. And that's been quite challenging for them. They've hated mixed PE, and actually imagine at 13, 14, that is a challenge. So we have to listen to the pupil voice there. And how do we get them active through the day that it carries on at home? Do they understand how important it is? And then most of all, is it inclusive? Okay, shall we go on then and just look at the Ofsted update? So Amanda Spielman said this in October. So this is a great one to share with senior leaders and governors, you know, the physical toll on children about being inactive. Now, this is no one's fault. There is no blame here. You know, it was vital that schools had a connection with their pupils at home and vice versa. But many children were sat remote learning for quite a while. And many did not have opportunities to be physically active outside for all sorts of reasons. Everybody did the best they can, and there was some great resources such as This Is Your PE and so on, Oak Academy and all of those things, but it didn't replace PE. So returning to PE is absolutely critical. And this is a really good quote to use with heads, because when I come on to where Ofsted are going, they actually want to see this. And then they also talked about the collaborative conversations. Now, everyone I've spoke to have had these, were really positive about it, because it looked and celebrated what schools had done in COVID, and they'd given them a bit more notice, had lots of discussion. But if we go to the next slide, it will tell you what actually happened in terms of what the inspectors found. Now, the practical subjects, as you can understand, really suffered. Now, I don't think that was because people didn't think they were important. It's just really difficult to teach PE and design technology and art and so on at home. I sit on the Council for Subject Associations board, and without a shadow of a doubt, all of us who have practical subjects were saying it's a challenge. So that's got to be redressed. And then also how interesting it is that all the bullet points below are inextricably linked. What a surprise that mental and physical stamina had reduced. Well, if practical PE had gone out of the window, of course you would expect a reduction. And then there was a negative impact on mental and social interaction. So we also see there is an issue about weight management. Again, we don't think that is the responsibility of the schools, but they are part of the solution in educating children and young people, who will then also help parents understand that they are not managing their weight. They are not perhaps eating the right diet. They're not as active as they should be. And whilst I'm not quite comfortable with physical fitness, I mean, if Jo Harris was on this call, she would be saying, you know, let's not do burpees with 5-year-olds, rightly so. But it's the general stamina. So as a result of that, we produced these 2 posters, which you may or may not have seen. They're free to download. So Simon, if you could put the first one up, please. They're called Reactivating Learning, and they look quite complex, but they were there as a tool for the workforce to use as an aid memoir. And we piloted it in November as soon as Amanda put out these findings. And what turned into a pilot just grew exponentially. So the diamond, the inner part of it, the pink, is really the why. You know, why are children physically, emotionally, socially and cognitively suffering here? And if you like, they are the signs and symptoms that you could actually pick up. So you might see a decline in motor skills. So if you're in a primary school and the children are slumped, that's because their core may have softened. If they're holding the pen like this, if they're cutting, I'm not sticking my tongue out, but you'll see children cutting with the tongue out. That is about regression of fine motor skills. And then it could be that they're just too tired. Their sleep pattern has changed. So that was sort of parts of the physical. Within the emotional, it may be they're more anxious. You know your children better than anyone. Are they clingy? Are they finding it hard to actually retain emotion? Are they getting upset? Do they not want to leave the parents or carers at the gate? And then if you look at the social, this is where we found some of the behaviour deteriorating. They can't share. They're not used to being socially so close to another child. And then finally, the cognitive is very much about retaining information, memory, lack of concentration, again, getting agitated. And then on the outer quadrants are some of the how we can put that right. Can we embed a health-based approach within PE, sport and physical activity? In the emotional well-being, can we actually set goals for young people? Can we try and motivate them and to try and be more confident? And socially, how do we group them? How do we introduce, do we do team challenges, team building? And then in terms of the cognitive, do we do bite-sized chunks? Do we put in more breaks with extra activity? And then on the next slide, it's the four quadrants there really do go into the actual what can we do practically that will make a difference in terms of the curriculum. But before we get into the what, the way we wanted it to be used was for teachers to actually shade, circle, do whatever they wanted to actually baseline where their children and young people were when they came in. And what was interesting was one particular head said, I'm going to translate this language and I'm going to get children to actually circle where they are. So it then became a self-review for children in Key Stage 2. Then they took it home and it became a debate with parents. So some parents had not picked up that their children would be anxious around other peers. And it was quite an interesting tool. And then the big change and the big transition came for us when one of the family's elder children who were at secondary school actually said, well, that's me, in helping their siblings, saying, don't worry, because I feel like that. And again, that hadn't been picked up. They said, we need this in secondary schools. So it became the most downloadable resource we've had other than health and safety. So we've sent some posters over with the presentation. So please use it as you see fit. And then in those four areas, you can actually see how it's broken down. They are just examples. So in terms of the physical, can we actually not just look at the high quality PE, but look at the physical activity there? How can you embed that more in lessons? And what we actually see is the physical activity cannot be just about getting up and having a wiggle and making us feel better. The research shows it has to be relevant. So for example, if you're doing something in geography around maps, around location, can that then be aligned to a PE lesson? And if we look at the visual, auditory and kinesthetic way people learn, what we've found is those children who actually do the orienteering alongside the actual geography, the physical activity, retain that information and progressed quicker than normal. So relating what you do physical activity wise within other curriculum subjects is key. And there are plenty of experts who know far more than we do about it. So for mathematics, are they using pedometers? Are they measuring? Are they measuring a route to create an outdoor and adventurous pathway? How can they use that if they're doing the daily mile? So it's linking the lessons with physical activity. Are you promoting active travel to school? Are they active at break time and lunch times? Are they keeping a diary at home? And, within that, can you actually map whether or not there's an improvement on emotional well-being? The goal setting we talked about, can you link that to how much physical activity? Can they see if there's a difference in their emotion, if they actually achieve better? Can we look at the rewards and sanction system to try and rebuild confidence? In terms of the social, can we get children working in groups to create better activity in break time, lunchtime? And then cognitively, can we look at how we rearrange the curriculum? So that's sort of a starter there for 10 for you all. So if we can go on to the next one, please, Simon. So what sort of solutions have we got? Without a shadow of a doubt, all the research is showing that actually the leadership from SLT and governors is key, but also the leadership from teachers, subject leaders, key stage coordinators is vital. And it's about getting everyone engaged in that, not just children and young people, and reminding parents that all the research says you want your children to be physically and emotionally well. So you've got to come with us on this journey when we prioritise PE. You know, you're not going to lose out your children in literacy and numeracy, but actually they won't learn unless they're physically, emotionally, socially, cognitively well. And let's look at that broad curriculum offer. As I said, that's what Ofsted are looking for. They are recognising the changes and amendments that have to be made to cope with COVID, but they're still expecting, and the word is an ambitious curriculum. So have we got that? Is it broad, or is it still quite focused? And then the 5 key indicators that were originally for the primary PE and school sport premium, if you look at them and sort of take them out of that context about the CMO guidelines, about whether PE contributes to whole school improvement, you see better emotional well-being, are children happier, is behaviour good, are your SATs improving? Are the staff really confident to have a sustainable legacy there? You know, are we actually broadening that curriculum, and are we introducing competition, not only inter and intra, but within PE lessons, within other lessons as well? Now, those can be used in a primary or secondary context. And when we're thinking about transition, last year's year 6 and those going into year 7, those are great tools to report on and say to your secondary colleagues, or a middle if you're in a 3-tier system, this is where our children and young people are in PE. Now, we've still got to manage all the safe practice principles below, but now COVID cannot be the tail that wags the dog either. It has to be a whole school policy about safety, about hand hygiene, masks in secondary school and so on, the bubbles, and there has to still be quite rigorous cleaning. But how we group and the activities we do is a school decision. So Simon, can you take us there to the solutions now and through PE, sport and physical activity? It's just to remind colleagues of the definitions here. PE in that left-hand corner is about the curriculum, education through the physical, the planned activities. Now, even though this was written about 7 years ago, the new education inspection framework talks about a sequential progressive curriculum. And that is what PE is built on. The school sport, if you like, are the enrichment activities, but what we'd like to see, and it's something we really drill down on in our quality mark, is we would prefer to see 100% of children and young people attending one club than 10% of the children attending all of them. And it's quite interesting when you look at how schools present their data, and other organisations as well. It's really important to look at how many clubs children go to, of course it is, but it's also important to look at how many of the school children go. You know, if you've got 300, do 295 go to a club, or is it just 20 go to everything? That's really important, and that is a great baseline. And to set yourself a target there, we're going to increase this. It's really important that we get more children active after school as well. And where is the link to the community? And then this ties in with the physical activity as well. This is really important because you know better than anybody that children and young people can heavily influence their parents. So if you've got a parent or carer who's not interested in physical education or any type of sport or swimming or playing in the park, but are avid gardeners, it's important our children recognise and praise their parents. Look at that. We've all been in the garden, I'm sure, in this weather. You know, my back and glutes are still killing me from trying to use a shovel in the hard ground. You know, it is really, really important to celebrate that, you know, or whether you're cleaning windows or cleaning, that is really good physical activity. How many of our children understand that? That, you know, mum and dad, grand, carer, they actually are physically active, but not in the context of some of the way it's perceived outside. They're not running up and down playing basketball or going jogging. It's really important that we see physical activity in its broadest sense and we celebrate those. They're inextricably linked. And if there's good PE, that's the statutory entitlement. That is what we can really influence. That will actually encourage people to be more active. And then, you know, we've had big discussions with the Secretary of State. We've had some criticism. And somebody wrote to me and said, we cannot believe in the current circumstances you haven't pushed for physical activity to be in the national curriculum. I sat on my response for 3 days because there were so many expletives in it, I'd have probably got the sack. And what people don't see is the curriculum in the whole. When we wrote that curriculum, we tried to give as much responsibility to teachers. And the fourth bullet point of the aims of the national curriculum, you all know, is to lead active lifestyles. What do people do? Straight in on the programme of study. Look at the 4 aims. That's what should be in your deep dive and part of your intent. This is what we intend to get. This is where we're going. This is our vision for PE. And we're looking at the purpose. And there are 10 key words in the purpose of the PE national curriculum. It's about resilience, character, vigorous activity, competition, succeed. There's lots of them. And then the programme of study is purely the vehicle you choose in which to deliver those. So all of those things there are in the national curriculum. But the biggest thing we can do is ensure that children and young people are educated through the physical domain so that they can then grow into various sporting activities as they progress onto secondary school and into the community. So how are we going to pay for all this? This is a key one, isn't it? So could I have the next slide, Simon, please? There are all sorts of funding streams, as you know. Now, we're working to support schools. We should have done a webinar this week, but we've not had approval yet from DFE. So, you know, keep the faith here. You already know that the carryover doesn't have to be reported now in July from last year. And I don't know, because nothing's been confirmed, but my gut feeling is there will be an extended carryover if I was asked to actually be honest and say so, because we have schools who, some of them, the most I've come across is £30,000 unspent. We have schools who've spent a lot, you know, so there's no right or wrong answer here. There's all sorts of challenges, but what is key here is it has to be additional and sustainable. So if the comprehensive spending review is brutal, you know, a lot of money's been spent in the last 18 months, rightly so, on making sure people are safe. If it's cut or it goes, if we've really made an additional and sustainable improvement, it shouldn't have too big an impact. If it stays, I would put money on it that there will still be that sustainable demand in there, because it cannot keep continuing forever. Now, because the whole physical and emotional well-being is there, I would suggest or hope that it will continue. But we have to also consider that there are 150,000 children and young people left primary school in 2019 unable to swim the statutory minimum 25 metres, and they couldn't save self-rescue. Now, it's going to get worse. We've been working with Steve Parry because swimming pools have been closed. We know that's no one's fault. There's no blame there. But we have to address this. So if there is an underspend, then let's top up that swimming. Now, you've just got to be sensible about how you use that, because you can't use it for national curriculum. But if you're trying to extend something, then you can, under key indicator 4. You can also do a lot. We've been working with Swim England and the RLSS on a pilot. And Swim England and RLSS have fantastic free resources. And we've looked at how we can do safe self-rescue in the gym, in the hall, in the classroom. Now, that is only a temporary fix. And the reason why we've done that is because of staycation. You know, my husband works in Birmingham. There are more canals than Venice. And I don't scare easily, but I do worry about drownings. We've already had 2 in Yorkshire with the better weather. And children are attracted to water. Now, that's not to scaremonger, but we've got to be able to get children to safe self-rescue. That, for me, is almost more important than the statutory 25 metres. We only want that to be temporary, because you can teach so much, but until you actually implement it, you don't know how effective it's been. But you can take children through this programme in the classroom. Or you can get other people to do it, or you can do an online course which will show you how to do it. So there are lots of opportunities there. Then if colleagues are in secondary, they have this TSA money. And if there's 10 people in your Teaching Schools Alliance, you get roughly 3.5k, so you're like 35k. If you're in a TSA of 100 schools, $250,000. But where does that fit with primary colleagues? I think now is the time to talk about transition. And we need to be able to say, 75% of our children are coming to you and they can't swim. Is there any chance you could pick up this as a special educational need? Because if you gave that stat to a secondary school, where you're feeding into that your children couldn't read or write, there would be a national uproar. And actually, this is a life skill. And it's really, really important. We work with colleagues as children transition out of primary into secondary. Then you've got your catch up. Now, 700 million has been put out there by DFE. And there is 6,000 for primary, 22,000 for secondary. Oh, I've missed a pound sign off there. Sorry about that. And it must be about evidence-based intervention. Okay, that's it. And then there is the Summer Activities Fund. Now, that is where secondary schools will invite children from year 6 going into year 7 to take part in enrichment activities. And we hope secondary schools will actually count PE, sport and physical activity as part of that. So there are 2 funnels there. So it's really important to look how schools use that 6,000 in the primary to actually intervene to allow catch up. And then there is the option to work with your secondary schools on transition. But there is also one-to-one. Now, if you have children with significant final gross motor skills or emotional well-being issues that you can solve through PE, through a one-to-one, you've had some fantastic yoga today. What a great use of catch-up. And I hate that word, but that's the word we have to use. Okay. Can we have the next one, please, Simon? What solutions have we got here? Well, these bullets are really for you to take back and work with your colleagues. So as I've talked about a lot about baselining, do you screen for motor impairment? Now, you know, some of the early years specialists, you are phenomenal. You are best at this. You're doing this anyway. But how many of your children can run, jump, skip, throw? You know, when we filmed at Sandal Castle in Wakefield, we went there because the head Nicola found out through baselining, 85% of her children in reception were not school ready, couldn't hold a pen, still in nappies, couldn't hold a knife and fork, and certainly couldn't skip, jump, run, throw, even at baseline level. She's now reduced that to 15% and has just become the best performing school at reading, which she feels there's a direct cause and effect there. And she has taken that school on a massive positive trajectory. So is PE really at the heart? Is it part of that whole school approach? Are you part of the solution? Are we able to advocate and get everybody to recognise this is not just senior leaders, it's your peers, it's parents, it's children and young people. You know, when we interview some children, you know, they're so articulate. And it can be, Jason interviewed someone at the school and they said, why do you enjoy PE? And this young lass in year 2 said, my heart beat, beat, beat. And as simple as that was, she got it, she knew the difference. And then obviously, as children become more articulate and understand the deeper aspects of PE, you get some terrific answers. Then in terms of your curriculum, these are the 3 key words. And again, there's a download on our resources page about designing your curriculum. It must be logical. There must be a sequence to it, and it must be progressive. Those are the 3 key buzzwords. And actually, they're really good if you're self-reviewing or you're getting a peer to have a look at your lesson. Is this logical? Are children getting a sequential learning experience? And more importantly, are they making progress? And remember, some of the impact will be straight, quick win. And then other impact will take a whole year, could take a whole term. And then, is it inclusive? Do we actually ensure that every single child is learning at the rate they are capable of learning? And then, have we narrowed it? Yeah, we may well done. You know, there's no problem with that. But now we need to broaden it. It needs to be really innovative. Does everyone understand it? As I've said to you, the children, could all your children, if I came in and said to you, tell me what PE means to you? Do the parents understand why you want it as a priority? Do visitors understand? Do your coaches working in school understand why it has to be at the heart? And then again, are we deploying our resources in the best way? You know, often I've seen teaching assistants taken out of PE to use intervention strategies to improve literacy and numeracy. Actually, they could be a great help in PE and often lead PE. So are we using staff correctly, or are other people just going and doing their marking while others are doing it? Where's the sustainability in that from the other slide? And then let's look at the next one about what sort of curriculums we've used. We've seen a lot of commercial schemes of work and various lesson plans put out there. And I just ask you this. If we do the same things differently, and we do not do different things, we're not going to get any change. If all of these resources are working, why have we got the levels of inactivity, obesity, and emotional well-being? Now, we can't blame COVID of this because it existed pre-COVID. What COVID has done is brought it to the forefront and exacerbated some of the challenges. There isn't a standard curriculum because children in Cumbria have different experiences to children in Cornwall. What we can have is a template, and what I really love to see was when I was in initial teacher education is students who then rip up their lesson plans and say it's not working because they're not learning at the rate or they're learning quicker. So they are really good to have as a baseline, as a confidence, but we shouldn't be working from a scheme of work and teaching 30 minutes a week, because Brianne's school might do 2 hours of PE. I'm the one with 30 minutes, Adam's got an hour. So 6 units should really enable Brianne to get through it quicker than me. I have seen and worked in schools where they've got 2 parallel classes and one is way ahead of the other. So it's important, if we're using other curriculum or other schemes of work, that we modify them, because an off the shelf will not work for everybody. It should be bespoke to the needs of your young people, the resources you've got, both human and physical resources. And it should enable you to create something that makes you a trailblazer for your young people. So when they leave you at the end of year 6, they go into secondary schools absolutely thriving. Now, we know some children hit a glass ceiling, and we're trying to look at that through the Studio U programme and the Sport England secondary teacher training. But it's really important that you trust your professional judgment. You're the experts, you're the best in the field, not somebody writing a book on it. You know, take from a book or a scheme of work what's good for you, but trust in your own capabilities. You know, you're a brilliant profession. Cream rises to the top. Everyone's shown that through COVID. So it's really important that you take risks. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. We learn from that. If it does work, brilliant, share it. Because people have been really good on social media, really unselfish, real community spirit, sharing resources. 99% of them are brilliant. 1 or 2, you probably picked them up, a bit dangerous, but hey ho, you know, we are where we are. And could I have the next slide, Simon? So this is sort of a summary sheet, an aid memoir for you, really. If you're back in school, go back, download your curriculum sheet, have a look at it, map it, and just cross-check that you are using pupil voice. Do you actually have a PE Sport Physical Activities Council? Do the children have an opportunity to talk to you? Do they tell you it was brilliant? Why was it brilliant? You know, it's really, really important that we also have staff, the most highly trained staff. Now, the reactivation posters actually were the prompt for us to create an emotional wellbeing qualification for teachers, because they wanted that confidence that what they were doing was right, and they wanted the tools to be able to advocate, which is why at the moment it is just for teachers, because you have to transform the agenda within your schools. And often if you're external to that, that's very hard to do. And then all of those bullet points sort of are indicative really of how you can change. And the advocacy is key, because you need parents, governors and children and young people on your side. And if you are inspected, part of that conversation is, do the governors, do the children, do the head teacher, do the subject leaders all talk about the same intent, implementation and impact from all subjects? So again, what we need to do is do different things. Okay, Simon, can we have this one? This is my favourite, because we don't celebrate what you do enough. You know, people just see the surface, and I think one of the great things about COVID in terms of perceptions of teachers is that parents actually understand. I was queuing to go in a shop in the second lockdown, and it was quite comical. I was so glad I got my mask on. I wasn't laughing at the person, but I was laughing with these parents who were creating about the challenges of having 2 children at home, or 3, and how did those children cope with 31 people in a class? How did teachers cope? It was a great question, and I just stood there listening and think, well, perhaps now you'll understand the challenge teachers face day in and day out. And then before I show you the next slide, just recall again what you said about those children and young people. You know, what we saw, that first little clip of that baby. Now, some of you will know this, and Brianna's certainly heard about me because I couldn't talk about it for a long time. In 2016, I finished work on a Friday afternoon, called at a shop on the way home in a village, and I fell crossing the road. The front of my shoe had sort of come away a bit, and I tripped. Didn't think anything about it. It was hurt at the time. Drove home, and then I thought, oh gosh, I'm getting a bit of a misery in my old age, because as a gymnast, I'd broken most bones in my body. Collarbone, coccyx were the most painful, but I was in quite a lot of pain. So the next day I went to the hospital and had an x-ray. Got it wrong. So I thought, well, yeah, I'm definitely becoming a bit of a hypochondriac. Within 2 weeks, I was totally paralysed on my right side. I'd broken my neck, broken my shoulder, broken my elbow, and broken my wrist, but we didn't find that out for at least 3 months. Eventually ended up, I had the choice of osseous spinal or Stoke Mandeville, and we went for osseous because it was shorter of the two for my family. 4 hours round trip, 2 hours each way on a good day. And there I was, flat on my back for 12 weeks. Awful. You know, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't write, I couldn't read, I couldn't do anything. And eventually, when I came out of intensive care and was alive and kicking, the diagnosis was I would not walk again unaided and would need a wheelchair. And I sat there and I thought, I can't do this. You know, there's got to be something I can do. And they never say never in the hospital. They're absolutely fabulous. And the consultant came to me and said, right, I want to start physio and hydrotherapy, which I had. And it was the physio. She was an amazing physio. Said, you've got a really strong core. So somewhere underneath that, you know, fat, menopausal fat, there was still a bit of core. And I used to be strapped to sort of like a frame, and started to use my right hand again. Anyway, they decided to operate, and the diagnosis was not great. My sister, who's a medic, didn't want me to have the op because it was either I'd remain the same, I could become paraplegic, or there'd be some difference. And I went for the some difference. And the rest is history, really. But what it was about was my core. Now, if you'd have said to me 30 years ago, being PE and being active will save your life and enable you to walk, I wouldn't have listened. And I'm a great advocate for PE. So it's really important we find a way of saying to young people, and if you've seen the video, Why Adults Fail, it shows someone throwing some keys. And I don't know if you've noticed, but you know, you might have thrown something to someone and they can't catch them. And when I'm the only woman in a house of 4, and I used to inevitably get the mum, there's no toilet roll, so I used to throw them up and make them catch them. And, you know, you just learn then to see whether or not children are physically competent. But actually trying to explain that to children, would a 7, 11, 13-year-old be interested that it could save their life at 55, 60, whatever? But what is important for them is to understand there's some longevity here. So this clip is a 91-year-old gymnast. And for me, it is about cradle to grave. We've seen the baby, we've seen the start of it. Now I actually wish I could do what she could do. So Simon, could you just play the last clip for me? Tell me what you think of this. And could I have the last slide, please? And this says it all. You know, if we are active, we are healthy, we are educated, what an achievement, cradle to grave. It is so important that PE, school sport and physical activity are at the heart of school life, and it's getting that message across to our peers, senior leaders, parents, and of course our children and young people. Thank you so much for listening. If you've got any questions, the next 2 slides have got our safe practice and all our details on. Ask them me now, or you know, contact me afterwards, but I'm more than happy to stay if you've got 5 minutes for any questions, Brianne or Adam, from your colleagues. Any questions?
If anybody's got any questions for Sue, then please feel free to unmute yourselves and
don't worry about the chat, just put your hands up. Oh, thank you, bless you. Any questions about money, premium, safe practice? No? Okie doke. Well, I hope you've got something to take away to use with your colleagues and ensure that we do thrive and not just survive in this and not lose any more PE time. The Prime Minister has got our task force recommendations. So fingers crossed, we should get something. Things are starting to come through, as I'm sure you've picked up, but we've not been able to release the recommendations yet, but we hope you'll be pleased. Nothing majorly different, but hopefully some significant weight behind getting some change in there to make sure PE stays firmly at the front of every school. Thanks ever so much, Adam and Brianne. I hope that's been helpful, and hopefully I'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sue, for
no problem.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks very much. Take care.
Bye. Bye.